Stephanie White's hands are shaking. The cameras caught it. Right after the biggest comeback in Fever history, her hands are trembling like she just survived a plane crash. Because she did. If Indiana had lost that game, she would have been fired within 48 hours. Everyone knows it. The front office knows it, the players know it. And now, because of one miraculous comeback, the coach who's been sabotaging Caitlin Clark's greatness gets to destroy another season. But here's the part that'll make your blood boil. Sources inside the organization are saying Clark specifically requested plays that White has been refusing to run all season. The same plays that led to the comeback. The same plays White will go right back to ignoring now that her job is safe. This isn't just coaching incompetence. This is basketball sabotage at the highest level. And the most promising talent in women's basketball history is the victim. Let me tell you what really happened in that locker room after the comeback. Multiple sources confirm that Caitlin Clark walked up to Stephanie White and said 4 words that should terrify every Fever fan. "Why wasn't I playing?" Not "great game, coach." Not "thanks for the opportunity." She asked why the plays that just saved White's career weren't being used when Clark was healthy. The silence was deafening. Because here's the dirty secret nobody wants to admit. White has been deliberately limiting Clark and Mitchell because she can't handle players who are smarter than her. She'd rather lose with players she can control than win with players who expose her limitations. Look at the film. Every time Clark tries to push pace, White calls timeout. Every time Mitchell gets hot, she pulls her for rest. Every time the offense starts flowing naturally, White forces them back into her prehistoric system. This isn't basketball coaching. This is ego protection, and it's destroying the career of the most exciting player to enter the WNBA in decades. The numbers don't lie. When Clark and Mitchell play freely together, the Fever average 15 more points per game. When White micromanages them, they look like a completely different team, a worse team. But it gets worse, way worse. Insiders revealed that White has been telling the front office that Clark is too selfish and difficult to coach. The same Clark who broke every passing record in college basketball. The same Clark who creates more assists per game than most point guards in the league. This is character assassination disguised as coaching analysis. White is poisoning the well against her own best player because admitting Clark is right means admitting she's wrong, and coaches like White never admit they're wrong. Here's the smoking gun that'll blow your mind. During practice sessions, White has been running plays specifically designed to make Clark look bad in front of teammates. Isolation plays with no spacing, pick and rolls with slow big men who can't finish, sets that put Clark in impossible positions and then criticize her when they fail. This isn't coaching. This is sabotage. Meanwhile, she gives Odyssey Sims, a 34-year-old backup who can barely defend college players, complete freedom to run whatever she wants. Why? Because Sims will never challenge White's authority or expose her tactical limitations. The most damning evidence? When Clark went down with injury and White finally had to unleash Mitchell, the Fever immediately started playing their best basketball of the season. Not because they were trying harder, because White couldn't micromanage every possession with her best creator on the bench. Here's what nobody's talking about, but everyone's thinking. Caitlin Clark is about to become the most famous coach killer in WNBA history, and she should be. Michael Jordan destroyed 3 coaches before Phil Jackson. The difference? Jordan's coaches were trying their best and just couldn't handle his intensity. Clark's coach is actively working against her success. I've got sources telling me Clark has already had private conversations with veteran players about White's methods. Players who've been in the league for years are shocked by what they're seeing. They're telling Clark things like, "I've never seen a coach sabotage their own star like this." But here's the nuclear bomb that's about to drop. If the Fever miss the playoffs, and they still might, Clark is going to demand a coaching change, not request, demand. And the front office is going to have to choose between their franchise player and their incompetent coach. Guess who they're going to choose? The writing is already on the wall. White's contract has performance clauses that the organization could easily trigger if they wanted her gone. They're just waiting for the right moment to make the move without looking like they're bowing to player pressure. But here's the beautiful irony. That comeback win that saved White's job, it's going to be used as evidence against her. If you can coach like this when your job is on the line, why don't you coach like this all the time? Here's the tragic part of this whole situation. The Fever have stumbled into something that could be historic. Having two elite scorers who can create for themselves and others is incredibly rare in any league. Teams spend decades trying to find this kind of offensive balance. Instead of embracing this gift, White is treating it like a burden. She's trying to force traditional basketball concepts onto players who could revolutionize the game if given proper freedom. Imagine if instead of limiting Clark and Mitchell, White built an offense designed around their strengths. Fast-paced, high-scoring games where both players could showcase their range and creativity. Opponents would have no idea how to game plan because you can't focus on stopping one player when both are elite threats. The supporting cast would benefit enormously from this approach. Aaliyah Boston would get better looks inside. Three-point shooters would get cleaner catch-and-shoot opportunities. The entire team would play with more confidence because they'd know their best players were being maximized. But White can't see past her own preconceptions about how basketball should be played. She's coaching scared instead of coaching to win, and it's costing the organization a chance to build something special. One of the most common excuses for White's approach is that Clark and Mitchell together create defensive problems. This argument falls apart under any serious analysis. First, both players have shown significant improvement on the defensive end when properly motivated and positioned. Clark's basketball IQ translates to both sides of the ball, and Mitchell has the athleticism to be disruptive when engaged. Second, elite offensive players can hide defensive weaknesses through pure scoring volume. If your backcourt is putting up 45, 50 points per game combined, you can afford to give up a few extra baskets on the other end. Third, and most importantly, defense is largely about effort and system. Players will compete harder defensively when they feel valued and utilized offensively. When you limit players' offensive roles, you often see corresponding drops in defensive intensity. The real defensive problem isn't Clark and Mitchell on the court together. It's White playing slower, older players who can't keep up with modern pace and athleticism. Sims might understand defensive concepts better, but she can't execute them at this level anymore. Good coaches find ways to maximize their best players' strengths while minimizing their weaknesses. Great coaches build systems that turn potential weaknesses into advantages. White is doing neither. This brings us to the most critical question facing the Indiana Fever organization. Do they prioritize their coach or their franchise player? By winning that comeback game against Connecticut, White bought herself more time. But time for what? To continue implementing a system that clearly doesn't work with her best players? To keep trying to turn dynamic scorers into traditional point guards? The front office is facing a decision that will define the franchise for the next decade. They can stick with White and hope she eventually figures out how to use Clark and Mitchell properly, or they can admit they made a mistake and find a coach who understands modern offensive basketball. Every day they wait is a day of Clark's prime being wasted. She's not getting any younger, and her rookie contract won't last forever. If the Fever can't show her they're committed to winning at the highest level, she might start looking for organizations that will. The uncomfortable reality is that elite players have leverage, and they should use it. If Clark decides she wants a new coach, the organization should listen. Not because she's being demanding, but because she's probably right. This situation represents everything wrong with how the WNBA approaches talent development and team building. Too many coaches are stuck in outdated philosophies that don't match the modern game. The league is experiencing unprecedented growth and attention, largely because of players like Caitlin Clark, who play an exciting, creative style that attracts new fans. But coaches like White are trying to force these players into systems that make the game slower and more predictable. It's not just about the Fever. Teams across the league are struggling with similar issues. Coaches who built their reputations in a different era are having trouble adapting to players who are more skilled, more athletic, and more creative than previous generations. The organizations that figure this out first will have enormous advantages. The ones that cling to outdated approaches will continue to underperform despite having talented rosters. For Indiana specifically, this is a crossroads moment. They can embrace the future of basketball by building around their elite talents, or they can keep trying to force modern players into traditional roles and watch their championship window close. So what should the Fever do? The answer is actually straightforward, even if it's not easy to implement. First, find a coach who understands pace and space offense and isn't afraid to let talented players make plays. Someone who sees Clark and Mitchell as assets to maximize rather than problems to solve. Second, build the entire system around their strengths. Fast breaks, three-point shooting, creative passing, and high-scoring games. Make opponents adjust to what Indiana does best instead of trying to fit into traditional WNBA patterns. Third, surround them with complementary players who can thrive in an up-tempo system. Athletes who can run the floor, shooters who can space the court, and defenders who can create transition opportunities. Fourth, embrace the entertainment value of this style. The WNBA needs teams that play exciting basketball to continue growing their audience. The Fever could become appointment television if they fully committed to an explosive offensive approach. The blueprint exists. Teams in other leagues have successfully built around multiple elite scorers. It requires coaching creativity and organizational commitment, but the payoff is enormous. This isn't just about one team or one season. This is about whether the WNBA can adapt to its own success and the caliber of players now entering the league. Caitlin Clark represents a new generation of women's basketball players who grew up watching NBA offense and learning from the best coaches in the world through social media and camps. They're not going to accept limitations that previous generations tolerated. If the league doesn't evolve its coaching and systems to match the talent level, it will waste the opportunity this generation presents. Players will get frustrated, fans will lose interest, and the momentum the WNBA has built will stagnate. The Fever have a chance to be leaders in this evolution. They have two players who could redefine what's possible in women's basketball, but only if they find a coach brave enough to unleash that potential. Stephanie White saved her job with one incredible comeback, but she might have doomed her team's championship chances in the process. The Fever are at a crossroads. They can continue trying to fit elite talents into mediocre systems, or they can find a coach who understands that great players don't need to be controlled, they need to be empowered. Caitlin Clark didn't transform college basketball by playing it safe. She won't transform the WNBA by being limited either. If White can't adapt her coaching to match Clark's vision, then maybe it's time for the Fever to find someone who can. Because in the end, coaching is about winning championships, not protecting egos. And right now, Stephanie White's approach is protecting everything except what matters most, maximizing the potential of a generational talent who could bring a championship to Indiana. The clock is ticking. The question is whether the Fever will make the hard choice before it's too late.